We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'ma compel him to include women in the sequel. Work! Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now.
So I'm Courtney Thompson, Courtney Thompson if you want my full name. I'm 21. My year is, I'm fourth year, MECO, so media communications. Political affiliations, I'm a member of Grassroots.
Can you tell us why you're running for board? And we don't want to hear it's because you love the union.
Yeah, no, okay, I wasn't going to say that. I mean, the union is great, but it's not why I'm running. I've been, since I was at uni, I've been involved initially tangentially because I was at college first, and every college student gets an automatically free access card. But being at college, I wasn't really a part of the union, was quite disconnected. Towards the end or mid, I started becoming more involved in SUDS, and then as the years have progressed, I've just kind of inevitably, because of my friends, done different things. So SUDS, the reviews, Radical Sex and Consent Week, and I guess I've gotten a pretty good look at what the union is, and how it works well, and where it's kind of failing students, or where it's probably not representing them as much. And I think there's a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for change, and I think the union has such a great capacity to do a lot of good and to really provide. I mean, it's the only remaining student union of its kind in Australia, and I think that's quite outstanding. But I think it can do a lot more to answer to and to involve its supposed members, which is the students. And that's why I'm running, because I think I have the skills and the capability to contribute in whatever meaningful way.
So I guess to summarise, you can see a lot of potential for the union to change, or
yeah.
you feel like you've identified a few areas where it needs work,
yeah.
And you want to be the architect of that change.
Not the architect. I don't think if elected I would be an architect. I'd be a member of a board who's made up of a lot of, board members. I'd be one probably voice, and I think I have something unique to bring.
Sure. Do you want to elaborate on what you feel you bring that's unique?
I've got this weird position where I think I've got a pretty good temperament for knowing how to work in a kind of bureaucratic environment, or admin. Through my roles, I've done a lot of kind of admin with secretaries of various societies. I've got CNS experience. I've directed a festival for the union, so I've got that experience behind me, as well as I've got experience from the collectives and perhaps from a different area of the university. I guess what I'm saying is I've dipped my toe inevitably in different pools, and I know what could happen if you bridge those make those bridges more kind of explicit. And I think I'm not here to be, this is not a career kind of opportunity for me, and I'm sick and tired of people coming into this seeing it merely as that, and I'm not seeing it as means to an end. I want to actually kind of get something done, or at least make the students feel as though they're heard. And a lot of my policies are around catering to and centering students and creating more control, more consultation, and actually listening to what they've said and making changes in the organisation that cater to those changes. So rather than, I'm not a candidate that's going to see a breakfast bar as the most important thing to put into the union or a commercial outlet. I'm more interested in, I guess, sometimes the not as pretty or I was going to say shiny. My campaign is glitter though, so that might not be appropriate. Policy statements, but I guess I bring something unique in that I've got the experience, and I want to just kind of do the job, and I don't want to. I prefer to sit back, and this actually gives me so much anxiety being here. So.
Would you have deregistered the Evangelical Union?
No. I think what's come out of this decision is that the good thing about this is that what happened was they went to deregister them or to threaten it after I think CNS has been in talks with them for a few years now, and they got to this situation, and a lot of students had to yell and had their voices heard. And the fact that a lot of the other religious faith based societies backed the EU is also important, because I think it says that, you know, they're all kind of, what happens to the EU, or what would have happened to the EU, would have had implications for other religious faith backgrounds. And I think it's important to once students show that it's important to them to, you know, this clause in their constitution or whatever it might be for a different society, we need to respect that. I think the people that it would have affected had, you know, we kept this blanket ban that, you know, they've got to remain open for everyone. You know, that one person who wants to join who doesn't want to declare faith, it probably doesn't matter as much as the people who would have been affected had they deregistered the society.
Sure. I wanted to come back to your political affiliation.
Yeah, cool.
Your membership of Grassroots. First, I'd like to know just how that is going to affect your decision making and your freedom to make calls as an individual board director. And then secondly, I'm interested to know why you've chosen to break from the Grassroots tradition of like running on the Grassroots green with quite recognisable policies and say like environmental sustainability and this kind of thing. It seems like a bit of a shift.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so Grassroots is essentially a collective of activists on campus from different groups. You know, you've got environmental, women's, queer, ethnocultural, ACAR, and it's pretty much just a group of students who support and want to kind of foster this activism. I guess in terms of my decision making on board, it's not binding. So being a part of Grassroots doesn't mean, similarly like it might for NLS and SAM, that I'm bound to whatever decision the collective makes. I can take things to the collective and get feedback if it doesn't obviously break with fiduciary duty, but I'm not obligated to. And obviously I guess I wouldn't be a member of Grassroots if I didn't align my kind of views with them. But it doesn't mean, ultimately, if I need to make a decision, I'm free to do that. In terms of breaking from Grassroots Green, which is the second time, I'm going to be honest, green's not me. It doesn't go with my skin complexion. No, I don't know, it wasn't me. And I kind of brought it to Grassroots and was like, I'm thinking of what would you think if I ran on it? And it's funny that a lot of the people who tried to dissuade me from doing something different were outside of Grassroots. Everyone in Grassroots was like, yes, you need to do whatever represents you. I think Union Board is very kind of individual, and they were kind of supportive of doing whatever made me feel more comfortable and what best represents me. I think it's also just disingenuous to kind of align yourself with a particular colour in order to, because it might be safer, because, you know, a large majority of students might automatically vote for me if I just wear green. I think I'm being more true to who I am by not just being green and kind of buying into that, frankly, hack mentality. And in terms of environmental, I mean, my policies just kind of reflect, I guess, my experience. And it doesn't necessarily highlight that I don't care about environmental issues. I mean, I do have sustainability aspects to my policies, and that's obviously important for the union to take a stand on. And I guess my policies were just, for me, where I saw gaps and what I particularly, where I'm at, what I wanted to see change.
At one point in there you mentioned like breaking fiduciary duty. Would you breach your fiduciary duties to the union if you felt it was in the interest of students?
If it was absolutely in the student interest, I would consider it. Whether or not I go to the extent of, say, Tom Rowie, which is probably the most kind of flashing lights example that most people would probably use. Unlike him and just kind of leaking the documents, I might go and see if there's other avenues in which to make that information available, because I think it was absolutely in the best interest of the students to know that in Tom's case, the university had brought police on campus. So I guess, but ultimately, like, I'd be acting in the best interest of the students, and if it was absolutely in their interest, then yeah.
Who would you rank first to third on a ballot for the existing candidates?
So as if I was voting for them?
As if you're voting. Yeah.
Okay. Number one would be Coco. I think it's really exciting to have finally an international student running for Union Board after years of candidates who are predominantly white and not international students talking about needing to diversify the union and be more inclusive. Finally, we have someone who can actually be a voice to represent those students. And I think it's important to kind of centre those voices rather than try and speak for them, which happens too often. Number two would, I guess, be Sam, based on the fact that he's running on, increased student control, and personally, I actually really liked his policy on trying to change Orion and make it more accessible. As someone who has battled that system, that's just one thing that I quite liked. But broadly, I think all of his policies are quite cool. And thirdly, I'd probably vote for Grace. She's a very strong candidate. Yeah, it's a lot of experience, kind of similar background, but also different. And I think she'd be a great board director. Very strong voice to have.
So does that mean that you'll be directing your preferences to those candidates?
Nope. I haven't talked about preferences. They're just who I would vote for if I was a voter. I honestly haven't thought about preferences yet, to be honest. And yeah, I'm not even sure how my preferences would work yet.
Does that mean then that, like, if not who you think is most qualified for the job?
Well, I mean, I
I
guess I don't know who my preference would go for. I don't even know if I'm going to preference, and that was my answer. I don't know if I'm going to preference anyone or if I'm going to go into preferences or use them. If I would, yeah, that's probably that's the logical answer, right? Is who I would vote for is who I would preference. But my answer was I don't know if I'm going to do preferences.
Yeah. Can you foresee a scenario where you do preferences purely based on what works out best for you politically?
No. If anything, look, as I said, if I thought someone else would be better for the job, I would give them the job, to be honest. So if I thought, if I really thought over the campaign trail, I had been proven to be the sixth weakest candidate, and I honestly believed that, someone who wanted or had a better resume than me, I'm not going to simply be on board because I think I'm better. If it's been proven that I'm not the one of the five strongest candidates, I'm not the type of, I don't know.
Yeah.
And what metric would you use?
In terms of what? Well, I don't know. I'm just saying metric. If I get a lot of feedback from students saying that my policies say we're out of touch, if they don't think I have proven myself as capable, competent, or ready to be on board, but somehow I don't even know how. Look, I don't know how that would work out. Yeah.
Would you rank last on a ballot paper?
Don Bonder.
Why?
Have you seen his policies? Look, number one, think it would be a huge waste probably of money to invest in McDonald's. I'm dubious of that policy, and the fact that he's openly a liberal. He's clearly quite divergent to my own political beliefs, so he'd probably be last.
Okay.
Not that I don't like McDonald's. I just think student money, probably there's other things that should be top of the priority list before that.
Just to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
But
in saying that, you know what?
You'd like a vegetarian cafe. So the difference between the two?
I've heard more people talk to me about wanting more vegetarian options on campus than Big Macs.
Okay. So purely anecdotal evidence.
Purely anecdotal evidence, yeah.
Sure. Well, maybe we should talk about.
And in that case,
vegetarian cafe policy now.
yeah. In saying that, if more people wanted McDonald's, I guess, and yeah.
Yeah. What I'm interested in, I suppose, is vegetarian cafe policies that's framed as a way to promote sustainability.
Yeah.
How exactly does that work?
Community food co-ops. Have you heard of the Monash Whole Foods canteen that operates. Kind of entirely student run. It's really a good model. And in terms of sustainability, it's also kind of linked to short-term using the facilities and resources that we already have.
So do you want to talk us briefly through the model? So
yeah, absolutely. For the Whole Foods.
Yeah, like what you
or how it
vegetarian cafe.
So currently there's a kitchen up in ISL behind it, not being used. Completely pretty much empty most of the time. Short term, I think we should use that and turn it into a community kind of space, reinvigorate it and use it in, as a space that could be turned into maybe not a cafe straight away. Long term though, I think it's something that needs to be put on the table when we look at the Wentworth Free Development, for instance, and working with the current food co-op that does exist and that isn't really used by that many students.
So, hold on, if that one's not used by many students, why would this one be used by many students?
Because that one's currently not run with the facilities of the USU. And the idea is to put it as a priority, use resources that the USU has and make it a priority and fund it. So whether or not that means better promotion, because I know the food co-op at the moment is not really promoted that much on campus, or spreading the message that, you know, it's entirely vegetarian, I think could appeal to a lot of students. And getting students involved, again, I would aim for it to be a community-run, student-run cafe.
So we might jump to another one of your policies. The one I have in mind is about reducing funding for elitist, inaccessible programs. I'd like to know specifically what elitist, inaccessible programs you're referring to,
Yep.
and like how you envisage you would actually put in action steps to withdraw resources from.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so at the moment, the ones that I'm probably talking about and that I have in mind, probably Incubate, which has the most money directed per participant of any union initiative, but is not the most used initiative, or does not cater to a really like cross-section of students at the moment. Another one, another union that has a large pool of money is probably HostCo, and I think HostCo is important because it brings in a lot of profit, but I think at the moment we're in a position where we can be affording to make or maybe not prioritize expanding HostCo and using that money and putting it into other things. So I guess in terms of realistic steps to be taken, as we know, every year the USU works on a calendar year budget. So the board sits down, looks at what they want to do, what they want to prioritise, and then they go to work and they look at how they work with the staff to pretty much put in a budget what they're going to prioritise, which is inherently, I guess, a political thing, and that's where I'm going to come in and say that we shouldn't prioritise programs such as Incubate or expanding HostCo, or I guess even, programs like Debates, which is important, but doesn't cater to a really large, cross-section of the union or of the university. So I guess real word, what I'm talking about there is looking at the budget and redirecting those funds and looking at the regulations of the funding models for, say, Incubate or Debates.
My first question would be, in what ways HostCo elitist and inaccessible?
It caters primarily to alumni, middle-aged white people. So it's elitist, I guess, in the sense that it doesn't really cater to the average student, if that exists. But it's there for a pretty specific purpose, and that's not necessarily for the current students. It's important, and I'm not saying that it's not, but I don't think it kind of does that.
In the case of both those programs that are well established and quite cherished by the USU, how do you envisage being able to get this sort of thing on the agenda? Because things like removing funding from, say, debating is a thing that's been raised multiple times in the past, and ultimately not much has happened.
Yeah. So how to get it on the table?
Yes.
I guess the first thing that I think, and this is probably broader also to the general thing that I think needs to happen with the union, is relevant and regular consultation with students. So whether or not that's just forums, holding a forum with students and saying, do you think this is something that we should be continually investing in? And if it's not, if they don't think it is, then we need to respond to that. I think it's the core of it gets down to actually talking to these members and talking to the students, and rather than just assuming like, they're both established and they're both very important. But at the end of the day, if students aren't using them and if the money can be spent in other ways, then I think it should be.
So I'm interested in your this part of your policy statement that says that the D floors are dead. Let's revitalise campus nightlife through partnering with party organisers and the Sydney art scene.
Yeah.
So I'm curious as to sort of what you envisaged for
that.
For that, yeah.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Okay, cool. USU parties are considered broadly as pretty lame. I think they are organised by no fault of the organisers. I've been one of those people who's organising the parties. But I think one of the things that the USU is meant to be is just like fun and kind of provide a student life, I guess. And parties are a big part of that, but I think USU parties at the moment leave kind of a bit to be desired. And I think there's a lot of students at uni who have experience and knowledge in throwing really cool parties. And so whether or not it's partnering with, party organisers such as like homosocial, like great homosocial parties have been thrown at Manning and been really well attended, or actually employing within the union students who have that experience, I guess that's a decision to be made, further down the line, and what works best. But essentially that's talking to, actually looking at and talking to people who have experience with parties rather than like staff who might be a bit out of touch and like have no idea.
I want to ask about the policy to do with feminist activism,
yeah, cool.
And specifically like what that looks like in practice, and in particular I suppose like one of the examples I'm interested in is this 24/7 safe space idea, because I do know that like the queer space at the very least has been like pressing for a while to try and get that as a consideration. I'm not terribly up to date on whether they've had success, but to my knowledge there's been a lot of policy inertia on that kind of thing. So how you push that kind of thing through and what it looks like in practice and how that's actually like pursuing a feminist goal.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I guess feminist activism, it looks like prioritising those things that I guess might align with feminist cause. So like sexual harassment I also mentioned, and generally looking after, I guess, those kind of causes that might, I think sexual harassment particularly, that's probably the number one thing on my mind. There's a huge problem on campus. Like the other week, my friend was chased down Eastern Avenue, and like things are shit still happening while we've still had like a sexual harassment campaign supposedly that answer to that. So I guess what it looks like in practice is continuing work with the Student Consultative Committee, which obviously provides direct access between the student leaders and the university, and pushing for these things to be a priority. In terms of the safe space, so I guess Robbie first brought it up with his career review, followed through with, I guess, Liam, and Jack is now doing work on it. And I think it's just something that needs to be continually pushed, because I think there's been students calling for it for a while. It's been a long process. In terms of practical things, I think it'll mean working with the university. So like, for instance, the university provides 24-hour security. So talking to them and seeing how that might be something that will work into how the safe space works. I guess there's issues that need to be addressed with the safe space, such as, autonomy. Doesn't need to be queer, women's, ethnoculture, and it's still yet to be completely fleshed out, and it's mentioned in the policy because I think it's a really important thing to continue to push for, continuing on through over the course of the next few years at least.
How do you put into practice, I suppose, like a feminist approach that is inclusive of like a very broad range of women and people? Well,
I guess you start with the groups, right? So you continue consultation with the collectives, for instance, and this is probably the policy that relies a lot, right? I think there's so much more room interaction between the student organisations. So I think that USU has a huge capacity to support. I think the collectives do a lot of important work. So the EAG, the environmental, ACAR, queer collective, women's collective, these are the groups who are involved predominantly in the activism on campus. And so when I'm talking about increasing and mobilising or having, feminist activism in the union. It means increasing consultation with those groups and those students to mobilise it, and to just having these things on the table.
Given that you just told us that you think programs like Incubate are like high-cost programs for the benefit of relatively few students, to my mind, like supporting new performing arts spaces falls into a similar category, and that's quite pricey and affects like the smaller group of people who are involved in that. Like, do you see a tension there?
Coming from, and look, I'm very open to being wrong here, but at least in my experience, the performing arts, you don't think you can really compare the two, because the performing arts isn't a sector of the union that receives like special extra money or a particular lot. Like, I mean, you look at the comedy scene and they get no funding at all on campus. So I don't think there's much tension. I think it needs to be prioritised. I don't think the performing arts on campus is at the moment, and that's why it's there, and that's why I think there's room. Absolutely. I think long term, again, if you're talking about the Wentworth redevelopment, looking at putting in a new theatre or revamping the cellar, because like frankly it's just like a safety hazard, and so I think there's a lot more room to give to the performing arts. I don't think it's equatable to those societies such as like debating, which is
But surely at the point at which you're
I understand
theatre, that is an investment.
Absolutely. But also I think with the performing arts it's slightly different, because not only are you helping those involved in the performing arts, but they put on shows for the wider student community, right? And so it's also that audience or that sector that's also going to benefit from something like that, rather than just the people who are directly involved and working.
Your issue is with so like debating and Incubate that you currently put on a pedestal.
I mean,
it's just going to be like the reverse.
No. I don't. Look, I want to make it clear. Debating and Incubate are great, right? Like, they've got their place. I think at the moment it's just reevaluating some of, like, looking at, for instance, if the performing arts, from my perspective and my experience, I'm very open to being wrong, and maybe I am, but it just seems to me that, like, rehearsal spaces, there's a lot of students who could benefit, and a theatre space, and then it would also benefit the broader community who will be attending the performances, I guess, rather than the insular people who are involved, which I, agree is smaller, right?
What do you think has been the best policy that's been implemented by the board this past year?
I think the work to increase better services and emphasis on international students. I think Mikey has headed that up, has been really great, as well as the equity access that Ed's been working on as treasurer has been really important. And I mean, from a review standpoint, from my experience, the identity review season is really exciting to me, and I think it's really nice to finally have that group represented, like, as a sole season.
And like of the current crop of board directors, who do you think is the most effective?
Yeah, to be honest, I probably couldn't tell you, because I don't know. I think there's a lot of work that the board directors put in that we probably don't see. And it would be the height of, like, I don't think anyone could really claim to be, if I'm not a board director, I don't see everything that they do. I don't know who's got, the most effective means of doing things, and so I don't know.
But based on what you do see,
yeah,
and I suppose on the kind of policy that you prioritise,
yeah,
like, who do you see evidence is working harder, and do you think is like putting into place effective policy?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think this current board has done a good job, and I think it kind of does. Look, this is maybe a cop-out answer. I just think it does an injustice to the way in which a board is meant to function as kind of cohesively, and they all contribute in some way. Effectively, look, I think they've just done a good job. I think the executive has worked really effectively. Alicia as president, Liv as VP, Ed as Tresh and, secretary, but also all of the other treasurers, and the fact that, like, Mikey's done good work. Ati is pushing for an ethnocultural space, writing, Tiff has been consulting with the Women's Collective, Jack is pushing, they're all doing different work, and I think I honestly, I don't like trying to like cherry pick and be like, that board director is doing a really effective job, because I think they're all doing a good job.
But that said, like, and you did raise the executive positions. Like, if you're so lucky as to be elected, you
Yeah.
like quite early into your board term need to be making decisions about who you are going to vote for executive positions and for the next president. Who do you think is best for the job?
I've got my own personal, I guess, thoughts. The process would be though, look, touch wood, I've got to get up first, right? So this is the main priority, is I've got to get through this election before I even start thinking about executive election. If I was elected though, the process would be whoever is interested in executive would probably have to come to Grassroots, pitch why they want to be, why they think they would be. They would talk, and then, you know, make some kind of recommendation as to who they think would be best in the executive positions. As I said before, it's not binding. If I thought the person that Grassroots kind of recommended or endorsed was absolutely wrong for the position, then obviously I would vote in a different way. But that's kind of how that would work.
So is that saying that you wouldn't follow perhaps past grassroots behaviour, making like preference deals with Unity to like divvy up like exec positions?
I don't think I'd come at it from my own benefit, right? I think it would be based on what Grassroots or I guess if I believed really strongly that whatever Grassroots has decided or done or recommended goes against what I think is best for the student, the student membership, then I probably wouldn't follow it. Because at the end of the day, it's not really about me and what's best for me. It's about what's best and what's going to be, the best solution going forward for the union. And I guess it'll be establishing kind of what we see as a vision for the next 12 or 24 months or whatever, and following that through. And if I thought, it didn't go along with that, then, I guess no. But if it did, I don't know. But it wouldn't be from the standpoint of, oh, this is great for me, and this is going to be for my career in some way. It would be what's best for, the student union and the union and the future of the union, rather than, yeah.
Yeah. I suppose to finish up, how do you measure that? Like, how can you know what is best for the future of students when you're making a call on that kind of thing?
Well, I guess no. And what I mean by that is that it's not, your question was, if it's best for you, would you would you go with a preference deal? No. Because I'm not looking at from what's best for me. If I'm going to listen to past board directors who are in Grassroots and who have had experience, as well as the fact that I'm a part of the union, I've been an active part of the union for years, and what I see, I wouldn't be running if I didn't have some kind of idea of a vision, or what I want, where I want the union to go.
Sure, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Self-evident, that I'm created equal. And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'ma compel him to include women in the sequel. Work! Look around.